Oh, I think we are live. Right now, there's just Hisham. Hopefully, a few other people will be joining us. Part of the problems of having meetings where we can sit at home in front of our own computer is that we don't have to leave ahead of time and plan. So Hisham, how are you doing today? And welcome to Facebook Live. And those of you who are watching on YouTube, this is the online Gurdjieff group meeting, June 30th. 2019, and right now there's myself, Allan, and Hisham. Ian's coming on. Hisham is in Morocco, and Ian will be in Portland, Oregon. Hisham, today we're going to be talking about continuing the conversation that I had last week about personality and essence. And you've just spent some time with your family, and a lot of our personality actually develops in the context of our family. And there's a way, the education of our family, the culture, as well as learning to hide from our family, learning to conceal our true self. What kind of observations did you have when you went back and spent those few weeks with your family in Marrakesh? Marrakesh?
Yes, Marrakesh. Well, as I have told the last meeting I attended, it's a subject that I have been working on since 2 years or 3 years now. So at any given opportunity where I have the chance to be with my parents, my family, I try to well, I don't have to try. It's kind of natural. I can observe how some traits of mine, some features of mine, where they did come from, and I can also observe and comprehend a lot of family dynamics, which I have also, which affected me also. But it was also always an opportunity to make, because remembering the days when I was still an adolescent and a kid, I didn't. There was not really a communicative relationship with my family in general. And as you said, one learns to hide from the family. And so these last 3 years, I have been working on developing communication with my brothers, my brother and sister, and especially with my mother, my father being already dead. So that gave me so many rich and emotional observations towards how I work internally, and that gave me also a view about the things that in order to go ahead, to go forward, I should work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity when we are back with our family to see how they don't see any change in us, and they impose an understanding of us, and they try not to let us escape. And so it's a good source of observation. Ian, how are you doing? Bright and early, 7:30 a.m. In Portland, Oregon.
Doing all right. Getting over a cold. Wasn't sure I was going to make it today, but got some good sleep the past few nights. So.
Hopefully you weren't at the protest. With against the whatever they call them. There was a big protest and violence in Portland, Oregon. The Hardy Boys or Sturdy Boys or something boys or.
Oh, Proud Boys. Yeah.
Proud Boys.
I found out about it on Facebook last night. I didn't know anything about it beforehand. It was also the World Naked Bike Ride yesterday.
Okay.
So Portland's got all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah. Karen, how are you doing in Mexico? Well, we don't hear you. There's no voice coming, Karen. We can't hear you. No. No, we still can't hear you. There's got to be controls down to your left. We can't hear you. Oh, there's Angelica. Oh, we're all coming online. I'm going to be continuing with the conversation on personality and essence today. And for those of you watching on Facebook Live, there's about a 10-second lag time between our speaking and your hearing this. But I wanted to do something slightly different in terms of our inner work. The most important thing we can do is to sense our body. It's to become aware of our body, to sense our body from the bottom of our feet to the top of our head, to become aware of our whole body at once. And all of the self-sensing exercises are all designed to ultimately lead us to the awareness of our body so that we can go and become aware of our whole body. Within the teaching of mindfulness in the West, they do body scans and all sorts of things. They don't really tell you that you're building a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger picture, so to speak, metaphorically, to develop that awareness of our physical body. So throughout today's meeting, instead of doing a specific 20-minute exercise, I'm going to ring a bell. And whenever you hear this, you can all hear this? When you hear this, take it as a reminding factor to come back into your body. I'm going to pay particular attention to ringing this bell when we're reading. Reading is such a mechanical activity. Reading pulls us into the reading and we lose awareness of ourselves. Often when we read from a state of deep identification where we lose awareness of ourselves. And so the inner exercise today will be just the ringing of the bell. And the ringing of the bell to come back into yourself. Angelica, how are things in Sao Paulo? Como vai você? Or como você vai?
Eu vou bem, obrigada. E você?
Okay.
Tudo bem. Hoje, today is a big greve, strike in
strike.
Brazil.
Oh.
Strike, yes. But it's okay. I'm okay.
Okay. What kind of a strike?
About what?
What kind of a strike? What are they striking for?
Striking for against the link manifestation for the government, and they are doing this to show that we need to give possibilities for the new government work with freedom, because until now the new president could do nothing because too much corruption.
Yeah. At times like these, Mr. Gurdjieff said it was a great opportunity to work on ourselves. When you're in a society and there's protest marches and various different things going on, because they suck all the mechanical energy and they don't reflect and they don't use the higher energy. So there's more of that left over, so to speak, for us to use. So it's a good time for those who are on the path, for those who are working on themselves to take the opportunity to enhance that energy and the awareness of the self. Karen, how are things down in Mexico?
Everything's very calm today. It's quiet, beautiful day, no hot and no heat anymore. Everything's fine here, Allan, but you spoke about family. I'll be gone for a week with my entire family at a family vacation, so I won't be here next week or probably the next week.
Okay, that sounds wonderful to be with family sometimes, and sometimes it can be a real opportunity to observe all our negative manifestations.
Well, I'm hoping it'll be both.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to, I've got too many windows open. Let me just stop this. Close, 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 no. Clear clipboard.
It's very different to see with your eyes.
With white?
Yes, normally you like blues.
It's you know, it really depends on. I'm just trying to close some of these windows. Okay. Here it is. You know, this is Mr. Gurdjieff's words. They're not really his words. He probably spoke in Russian, which is translated into French by Madame de Salzman, which was written down in English in French by one of his students during the Second World War and translated into English. But this comes from Mr. Gurdjieff. I wish to be. I can be. I have the right to be. I have the ability to be. I swear to myself that this will never be for my personal profit, but to help others. I wish to be to help others. So, let me just come back to the main screen. Whoops, I didn't even share that, did I? Brian, how are you doing? I'll just quickly, briefly share that so it's on the screen. I wish to be, I can be, I have the right to be, I have the ability to be. I swear to myself that this will never be for my personal profit, but to help others. I wish to be to help others. This is to be understood as a vow. Brian, how are things down in Scottsdale, Arizona?
Everything's really good. Sorry I'm late today.
That's okay. I'm glad you made it. You know, as I mentioned right at the beginning, when we have to go to a meeting somewhere and get in cars or take the bus, we always plan ahead of time. But at home, we can get so distracted with different things going on, and we got to get a cup of coffee and all of that. So I'm glad you made it.
Sure.
So for today's inner exercise, I'm not going to do a formal inner exercise. As best as you can, try to sense your body. Try to become aware of your body. I remember back in the 80s when I first came across the teachings, actually this was a few years into the teachings, I used to call entering into the state of self-remembering, to myself, I used to call it shifting into essence. Stepping back, moving away from the surface of our personality into something deeper, more inward. Last week I used a metaphor. Imagine an orb, a glass orb, and inside is the essence and the illumination of the essence. And there's a little distortion in the way I'm telling this because essence can be broken. But inside is essence, and then we have the glass, and then culture, education. It's like taking, you know, a Sharpie, a dark marker, and drawing all sorts of things on the surface of the glass so that the essence inside gets more and more sort of strangled, more and more hidden. And so when we become, when we self-remember, when we engage in any form of mindful awareness, we are actually stepping up to that higher level, world 24, which is the realm of essence. We're moving away from world 48, which is the realm of personality. So anytime we engage in any form of mindfulness, we are actually stepping ever so slightly away from our personality. So however you can, whatever level you are at, if you're a beginner, maybe all you can do is become aware of your hands. We have more sensory nerve nodes in our hands and fingers than we do anywhere else in our body. And it's easiest to become mindful of our hands and fingers. If you have done a lot more work on yourself, to become aware of as much of your body as possible. And if you are capable of self-remembering, and in this case, it's more important for the self-remembering to focus on the visual, on the fact that you are mindfully looking at the screen, and to focus on the sound that you are hearing while sensing your body. So to try to develop as big a form of self-remembering or mindful awareness as you can, particularly when we do the reading. And I'm going to periodically, I've got a mindfulness bell here, and I'm going to periodically just tap it. And when I tap it, that's a signal to remember yourself as much as you can. And as I said, that it will be different for different people depending on the amount of work you've done on yourself. And just as an aside, you know, I was talking at the beginning with Hisham about going back and spending time with your family, and you go back as an adult and they slot you into a place, a space in their head, and they don't allow you to escape the constraints of your personality. Mr. Gurdjieff, in the wartime meetings, Paris notes that were taken during the Nazi occupation of Paris, gave some of his students an exercise that when they were with their family, and even when they weren't with their family, but particularly when they were with their family, and you know, when they say, for instance, looked at their mother, to say in their mind the words, I am thou, thou art I, while self-remembering. So to use the connection with family as a reminding factor. So when you're with your brother or your sister or your children or your parents, periodically remember yourself and look at them, and in your mind think, I am thou, thou art I, while self-remembering. And my assumption, my guess is that this loosens ever so slightly the constraints of our personality. We are moving inwards into a deeper part of ourselves. And perhaps in the next meeting, I will talk about mindfulness. Mindfulness from a Gurdjieffian perspective. I claim to Buddhists that I know more about mindfulness than a Buddhist monk, and they look at me. And it's because I know what the Buddhist monk knows, and I know what I understand from the Gurdjieff teachings. And they don't understand different levels of being. They don't understand the inward detachment. It's not part of how they were taught. So I will explain mindfulness in the next meeting from a Gurdjieffian perspective. So whenever I ring the bell, just in however you can, in whatever way you can, try to remember yourself, even if it's just your hands, or maybe your hands and feet, or your whole body, or your body breathing, or to be aware of what you see here while sensing your body. Try to do it, find your own level. Actually, try to find that level where you're comfortable below and you feel like a fish out of water above. We want to live at that level where we are competent on one side of the line and incompetent on the other side. That's where real growth occurs. So talking about personality and essence, and I'm going to continue with this. Whoops, let me just lower this slightly. So personality and essence. Raise it up a little bit more. Personality is created partly by the intentional influences of other people. That is by education, and partly by involuntary imitation of them as a child. In the creation of personality, a great part is also played by resistance to people around him and by attempts to conceal from them something that is his own or real. So here we see three big things or whatever that create personality. So let's just explore this a little bit more, but just come back to yourself. So by education, by imitation, and by resistance. So my mother was incredibly big on manners. She thought manners were the most important thing a child could be taught. And so as a child, she was forever saying, "What do you say?" And the words that were supposed to come out of my mouth were "thank you." Mr. Gurdjieff hated when parents did that to their children. He claimed that it created a degree of insincerity and something to hide behind. And he said if a child is thankful, it may not necessarily say it with the mouth, but you will see it in the expression on their face, in the movement in their body, in the smile. And apparently Mr. Gurdjieff was known as Monsieur Bonbon, Mr. Candy Candy, in French, when he went around Paris. And he would carry these hard sweets around with him and give them to small children, and also waiters and all sorts of people. But children, they would see him and their eyes would light up and they would be so glad to see him. And that came from their essence. That was something true within them. But this, say thank you, and you don't want to embarrass us in public. We want you to have manners and stuff like that. So part of the education, the influences of the people around us, trying to make us so-called cultured individuals with proper manners and all of that, is part of the way that personality develops. The other one that he talks about here is the imitation of other people. We have what they call mirror neurons in our brain, where if you see someone drinking a cup of water, inside your brain, your mirror neurons will be responding, and it will be like you are drinking a cup of water, except I got a jar of water here. But so we imitate people. We imitate their emotions. We learn emotions. Someone smiles at us, we smile back at them. A lot of what we learn is done through imitation. We want to be like that person, and so we begin to act like that person, and it becomes a part of our personality. And then personality is also a resistance to people, a hiding away. If I go back to that orb and the words and everything on the outside, part of it, we create those words and that darkening on the outside so that people can't see what is within. You're walking down the street and you see a friend, and in English, at least in Canada, how are you? Hey, I'm good, I'm fine. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. Inside you may be broken, you may be devastated, but we put on that face and we pretend we're fine. And that's part of our personality And that was created long ago. It's so that we could hide things away from the world. You express certain things to your parents and whatever, and they just slam down at you when you're 5 or 6 years old, and you can't do that. And so we learn to hide away. So part of the personality develops when we're children as a protective mechanism, to protect what is our own, to hide it away so it can't be criticized, stomped down, hurt, or whatever. Moving along. Essence is the truth in man. Personality is the false. But in proportion as personality grows, essence manifests itself more and more rarely and more feebly. And it very often happens that essence stops its growth at a very early age and grows no further. It happens very often that the essence of a grown-up man, even a very intellectual, and in the accepted meaning of the word, highly educated man, stops at the level of a child of 5 or 6. This means that everything we see in this man is really not his own. What is his own in man, that is his essence, is usually only manifested in his instincts and his simplest emotions. And here it's good to note that, not only can we engage in self-observation, self-study, but the self-study and self-observation, there's a corollary. It's observing other people and studying other people. We all know people who are really all personality. They don't have a lot of essence. Their essence is very poorly developed. And so one way to study personality is to study it within ourselves. And the other way is to study it in other people. So someone who's really cultured, someone who's very erudite, they're really well spoken, they're really well mannered. A lot of people look up to them, but it's their personality and they're constrained. And it's like a straitjacket that they're wearing, and nothing else is allowed to develop. Just self-remember yourself, shift into essence. The cases, however, when a man's essence grows, there are cases, however, when a man's essence grows in parallel with his personality. Such cases represent very rare exceptions, especially in the circumstances of cultured life. Essence has more chances of development in men who live nearer to nature in difficult conditions of constant struggle and danger. But as a rule, I'm not sure. Okay. But as a rule, the personality of such people is very little developed. They have more of what is their own, but very little of what is not their own. That is to say, they lack education and instruction. They lack culture. We talk about hicks and hillbillies and farmers and country folk. Country folk, those people, their essence is more developed because they are more in tune with nature, more in tune with their environment, more in tune with what is going on around them, and less influenced and exposed to other people like those of us who grew up in cities. Culture. Culture creates personality and is at the same time the product and the result of personality. We do not realize that the whole of our life, all we call civilization, all we call science, philosophy, art, and politics is created by people's personality, that is, by what is not their own. The element that is not his own differs from what is man's own by the fact it can be lost, altered, or taken away by artificial means. This means, Mr. Gurdjieff in Beelzebub Tales says that what we remember in a state of self-remembering, what we learn in a state of self-remembering, has the possibility of forever becoming a part of our being. So that's why I'm trying to get you today to become aware of your body, to become aware of your breathing, to become aware of what you can see, hear, perhaps smell, taste, all of this with your head brain, to consciously look, listen, smell, taste, while sensing your body, to become more mindful while we are going through this, in order for you to understand that when we exist more in essence, when we exist more, in world 24, at that higher level, at the planetary realm, that we remember things better. I didn't understand this years ago, but in certain classes, I self-remembered as opposed to other classes. The classes I took on Hinduism at Carleton University in Ottawa, I self-remembered. The classes that I took on, the belief in life after death and religious survey courses and stuff like that, I wasn't nearly in the state of self-remembering. And so the information that I learned in the one class, I've retained, and the other class, I've completely lost. I've taken numerous courses in economics way back when, and I have no memory of them. But at the same time, I was taking courses like the psychology of consciousness and various other different things, and I have a real clear memory of those classes and the information. It's kind of like it's there for me to access, and it's because I learned it from a state of self-remembering. I would sit in class in the seat in the back so I could watch everyone, and I would try to remember myself as fully as I could in that moment while the professor was lecturing, and I was able to absorb a lot more information. Personality is very involved in reading. Reading can be a very mechanical activity. We get lost in the words of books. Novels are purposefully designed to pull us into a state of identification, to pull us into the state of imagination and the images in our mind, and to pull us away from the state of self-remembering and any kind of mindful awareness. So reading is a very mechanical activity, and learning how to bring a degree of self-remembering or mindfulness to reading will enhance both our comprehension as well as our memory. So the element that is not his own differs from what is man's own by the fact that it can be lost, altered, or taken away. So those courses I took in economics, at the same time I was taking courses like the psychology of consciousness, I learned in personality. It's gone. Mr. Gurdjieff talks about pouring from the empty to the void. And that information was pouring from the empty to the void, and it's lost. The other information that I learned from the state of self-remembering is I still have it. So again, try to self-remember, or at least self-sense, or at least become mindful of your hands to the level of your ability. And I'm just going to I don't know, this worked well yesterday. I'm not sure why or last week. I'll try this one. No, this one I'm gonna have to go back to the hand. Try to self-remember yourself. Try to become aware of your body and your breath. A very important moment in the work on oneself is when a man begins to distinguish between his personality and his essence. So become aware of your essence right now. Become mindful. Make that inward movement, the separation from the state of attachment, from the state of identification into your essence, into a state of mindful awareness, into being present as fully as you can. A man's real I, his individuality, can only grow from his essence. And if you recall at the last meeting when I showed that, the diagram I often show, personality is world 48. It's the mechanical realm fueled by hydrogen 48. It's earth in the ray of creation. Essence is world 24. It's the realm of self-reflectivity, personal consciousness. And personal consciousness is the word that they use in the outside world is mindfulness. They sort of mean the same thing. The level of the planetary realm, this is the movement into essence. So when you become aware of your body, when you become aware of your breath, when you become aware of the sensation of air that touches your face, the touch of clothing on your body, when you become aware of the various muscles involved in breathing, when you become aware of the position of your body, the posture, gravity, balance, you are actually moving to world 24. And you are actually moving inwards as well. And I will explain more about that at the next meeting. So by reading this, by being in this state of mindful awareness, of self-remembering, we are moving into that higher level. And from that higher level, the real I grows out of it. It's the next level. If you do not have a real essence and you haven't cultivated your essence at the realm of world 24, the planetary realm, the real I, which comes from hydrogen 12, the realm of the solar realm, it cannot grow. It's like we are an apartment building, and right now we are trying to build a story on top, and the story is at world 24. And then when we have that, we can build the next story at world 12, the solar realm. But if we do not have a solid world 24, if that story on the apartment building is not firm and solid and proper, it will not support the higher development. So again, just kind of shifting back into essence, into the mindful state, into the state of personal reflectivity. It can be said that a man's individuality, his essence, is his essence growing up mature. But in order to enable essence to grow up, it is first of all necessary to weaken the constant pressure of personality upon it, because the obstacles to growth of essence are contained in personality. So I'll talk about this more at the next meeting, but imagine that we are three-story beings. In the middle is the earthly realm, it's world 48. In the basement, it's world 96, the very reactive lunatic emotions that feed the moon, the homicidal rage, the anger where we completely lose it. And then the top story is the realm of personal reflectivity, of mindful awareness. In order to turn the lights on the top floor, we've got to figure out where we are leaking energy in the lower levels. So not only do we have to enhance our experience of essence, to remember ourselves, to come back to our body, our breath, what we can see here now in this moment, but we also have to work on the lower stories to find out where the energy has been blocked, where we are leaking energy, and we are doing this through our personality. And so this is something I've repeated many times. Part of the work involves lifting ourselves up into this state. So trying to remember your body, your breath, your breathing, what you can see, what you can hear, what you can smell, what you can taste, and perhaps even your feelings. And then figuring out why you can't do that as much as you would like because of the way we are leaking the energy at the lower level. And so it's through the constraints of our personality that we leak this energy. So I must have too many things on my computer. I'm not sure why it's so slow. But as you know, take this as an opportunity to remember yourself, to be aware of your body, of your breath, of your breathing. If we take an average cultured man, we shall see that in the vast majority of cases, and here's something very important as well, active, passive, the polarities. Personality is the active element in him, while his essence is the passive element. Inner growth of man cannot begin so long as this order of things remains unchanged. Personality must become passive, and essence must become active. And we do this through mindful awareness, through moving inwards, through detaching ourselves from the surface of our being, through personal reflectivity, by becoming aware of our body, our breath, our breathing, what we can see, hear, smell, taste. This can happen only if buffers are removed or weakened, because buffers are the chief weapon by the help of which personality holds essence in subjugation. And I was actually talking with Ian a couple of weeks ago, and Ian, you were right, buffers are very important in this process. And buffers are actually created with C12. And they are created, they're mechanical contrivances. And a buffer, like a horse that has blinders on that prevent it from seeing the flowers and the grass at the sides of the roads, our buffers prevent us from seeing our contradictions. Our buffers are mechanical contrivances that are created not intentionally and not consciously, but through the misuse of C12. And I'll do a meeting on the misuse of C12 and the different manifestations of it later in the series. But buffers lock our personality into place. Now, in Tales, in the chapter on hypnosis, Mr. Gurdjieff said that hypnosis is a tool that can decrystallize previous crystallizations within us. And I interpret that to mean that hypnosis is a tool that we can use to remove buffers, to help free ourselves, but it's got to be done in a right way with the right understanding, or else it can lead to even deeper problems. So, sensing your body, aware of your body, aware of your breathing, the air that touches your face, the hair, the clothing on your body, aware of your breath, the movement of the muscles, aware of what you can see, consciously aware of information, light coming into your eyes, sound coming into your ears, the sensation of self. So, as has been said earlier, in the case of less cultured people, essence is often more highly developed than it is in cultured man. It would seem that they ought to be nearer the possibility of growth, but in reality it is not so, because their personality proves to be insufficiently developed. For inner growth, for work on oneself, a certain development of personality as well as a certain strength of essence are necessary. Personality consists of roles and buffers resulting from a certain work of the centers. An insufficiently developed personality means a lack of roles. That is, a lack of knowledge, a lack of information, a lack of material upon which work on oneself must be based. Now, I just want to return to something I just read a moment ago. There was an exercise that Mr. Gurdjieff gave to his students during the Nazi occupation of Paris. And he told them to play a role. And the role that they were to play was themselves. He said, you know, become like an actor, play a role, wear a mask, but the mask that you wear is the mask that you normally wear. So no one will notice a difference in you. They won't see a change in your behavior. They will just see you. But by turning our personality into a mask and moving and stepping inward into our essence, beyond that mask, beyond the role that we are playing, we are actually making essence active and personality passive. So when you go to work tomorrow, or if you're in Canada, happy Canada Day, where we've got a holiday Monday. But if you go to work tomorrow or the next day, do it as a role. Pretend to be yourself. Pretend to act like yourself, but knowing that it's an act, like an actor in a role, playing the role of yourself, so that yourself, that part that you're playing a role, your personality, occupies the passive rather than the active position. And again, sensing your body, your breath, your breathing, focusing on me trying to move these words up. Without some store of knowledge, without a certain amount of material not his own, a man cannot begin to work on himself. He cannot begin to study himself. He cannot begin to struggle with his mechanical habits, simply because there will be no reason or motive for undertaking such work. So personality and essence have to work together, with essence active and personality passive. Mr. Gurdjieff said that people who are really too much personality, they can't join this path, the fourth way. Perhaps they might become a fakir and work on the physical body, or maybe a monk and work on the emotional body, but the ability to work on all three centers, head, body, and feelings, is beyond them. We need our personality. We need to struggle against our personality. If our personality is porous and ill-defined, there is not something that we can oppose, something that we can struggle with. And struggle is a very important concept in these teachings. And it's the only enemy and the only place where we really struggle is with ourselves, with those mechanical habits. Actually, I'm just going to, I meant to talk about something that I notice within myself, and this is related, and I don't have it with me. I've been doing an exercise with my keys, and opening doors with keys is a very mechanical habit, and I've been shifting my keys to different pockets and different hands and stuff like that, and that's not so difficult for me to do. And what I did was I have little color codings on my keys. One is blue for the outside door and the yellow one for the inside door, except they were reversed. And changing just the color has messed me up. I'm so habituated to color, and color is part of the instinctive center, that it's causing such friction in me, such struggle within me to, this is the outside door key. And it's amazing how many times I mess it up whereas I can shift it to pockets and different things, and that's where it's part of the mechanical, part of the moving center as opposed to the instinctual. And I'm able to work much more with the moving center than the instinctual center. This is a mechanical habit that I have to struggle against. So come back here. So just remember your body, bring yourself back to yourself. A successful beginning of work on oneself requires the happy occurrence of an equal development of personality and essence. Such occurrence will give the greatest assurance of success. If essence is very little developed, a long preparatory period of work is required, and this work will be quite fruitless if a man's essence is rotten inside, or if it develops some irreparable defects. And this is more easily understood when you get an understanding of what happens with the misuse of C12. And it creates all these abnormal crystallizations and growths within ourselves at the level of essence. I don't want to go too deeply into this today, but I will explain it in future meetings. The misuse of C12. So aware of ourself, our body, our breathing. Conditions of this kind occur fairly often. An abnormal development of personality very often arrests the development of essence at such an early stage that essence becomes a small, deformed thing. From a small, deformed thing, nothing else can be got. Oops. Moreover, it happens fairly often that essence dies in a man while his personality and his body are still alive. A considerable percentage of the people we meet in the streets of a great town are people who are empty inside. That is, they are actually already dead. And this is actually a scary, scary thought. And a realization, to realize that some people are really, their essence has been strangled through the overdevelopment of their personality. I used a metaphor last week of a garden with native flora, native plants, and then the seeds that come in by the wind landing in the garden and strangling the native seeds. So we have to learn to control and prune those foreign seeds, but we have to allow some of them to grow and develop because we need them to help our essence develop. So again, become aware of your body, your breath, your breathing. Really strive to be as mindful and aware as you can. Personality sees only what it likes to see and what does not interfere with its life. It never sees what it does not like. This is both good and bad at the same time. It is good if a man wants to sleep, bad if he wants to awaken. So, one of the hypnotic forces that keep man asleep is the constraint of his personality. And, within psychology, they call this the conformational bias. We only see what we want to see. We only hear what we want to hear. And, you can have a conversation and then someone says, and then Joe said this, and you have a beef with Joe and you don't like him, and you zoom in on that. You only hear what you want to hear. You don't hear all the other stuff. So if a man wishes to create individuality of his own, he must first free himself from general laws. General laws are by no means obligatory for man. He can free himself from many of them if he frees himself from buffers and from imagination. All this is connected with liberation from personality. And again, I'm going to go back to some of the abstract theory. The absolute is world one. The absolute is under the law of unity. The next step down is the Trinity, so to speak, world three, and it's under the law of three. And so as we move down, we come under more and more and more constraints. So when we operate from personality, we are actually bound and limited by 48 laws. And when we move into essence, when we move into the planetary realm, when we step up to that higher level, when we move inwards, we are actually beginning to free ourselves from half of the constraints and laws that we are under. When we are centered in personality, we can say we are centered in 48 laws. And when we grow our essence and move up and get centered in our essence, we are then only constrained and governed by 24 laws. So we are twice as free, twice as vibrant, twice as aware, twice as conscious. So this gives us another marker to observe the difference between personality and essence. Personality is twice as heavy, twice as mechanical, half as conscious as essence. So there's a qualitative difference between personality and essence. It's not like you have personality on one side and essence on the other. Personality is lower than essence. And by moving into essence, we are removing these constraints from ourselves. Become aware of your body, become aware of your breath, become aware of the sensation of self. The movement of the muscles as you breathe, the position of your body, gravity, aware of the difference between white, yellow, and black on the screen, aware of perceiving this. Personality feeds on imagination and falsehood. If the falsehood in which man lives is decreased and imagination is decreased, personality soon awakens. For those of you who have an advanced knowledge of the Gurdjieff teachings, imagination is part of the misuse of C12, sexual energy, the highest energy that the physical body is capable of producing. It's the octave of food is the only octave that goes from Do 768 and it moves up to C12. And C12, the energy, the highest energy produced by the octave of food is produced in our testes, our ovaries. And this is the highest energy a normal man produces. But this energy can be stolen and siphoned away by both the emotional center and the intellectual center. And one of the manifestations of this is the imagination. And here it's also important to notice that when Mr. Gurdjieff was speaking to Uspensky wasn't fully developed, so he only talked about sort of lower dimensions of the teaching. Mr. Gurdjieff said that self-love is a dirty thing and self-love is a noble thing. And he differentiated subjective self-love, the ego is the dirty thing, but objective self-love is a noble thing, it's an important thing. So the self-love at the level of, world 48, at the earthly level, at the mechanical level, is tainted with the ego. It reeks of the ego and it's a dirty thing. But true objective self-love is a much higher thing, far more important. And so there are two levels of imagination. All imagination is not bad. It's when imagination is the result of the misuse of C12. And you can taste, you can learn to become aware of the taste of your ego in the lower subjective form of imagination. The higher form of imagination, the imaginative faculty, he often or sometimes uses the word active being mentation. So there's a higher objective form of imagination, and there is the lower subjective egocentric form of imagination that is the result of the misuse of C12, of sexual energy. So becoming aware of imagination. In my imagination, my name is Allan. My name's not Allan. That was given to me. It's part of my personality. You know, when I was a little baby, you know, I was born. Oh, look at Allan. Oh, there's Allan. Oh, look at Allan smiling. And I'm there smiling. Oh, I'm Allan. And I took that and take that as a reality. But my name came from my parents. It's not who I am. The words of the language that I use are not who I am. The English, there's a certain level of language that is essence, but the words and concepts and things are all personality. So we've got to figure out what these parts of ourselves are, how they manifest in ourself, and begin to work on them. A mile from where I am is the shore of a lake. And the lake is so big, we cannot see across the other side. And in the middle of the lake, right at the very bottom, is this imaginary line. It's a false line. It doesn't exist in nature. And it's the border between Canada and the United States of America. It's a collective hallucination. It's a falsehood. And there are many, many falsehoods that we hold to be true. And part of our personality, I like to think of hydrogen 24 as the energy of identity. And it's like a spray. And if we spray it on the self-sensing of our body, if we spray it on things that are real, it leads to the formation of our Kesdjan body. But if we spray it on false things, it's like creating these sand castles in the sky. You know, talking to Ian just briefly about, there was a protest and a kind of riot in Portland, Oregon yesterday with the Proud Boys, white nationalists. That is pure personality. There is no real genetic difference between human beings. We look at each other and we impose imagination and falsehood on skin color and eye color and all of that. And, you know, when you talk to geneticists and people who know, there's so little difference between one human and another, that these are false ideas that people hold in their mind. And it forms part of their personality, and it comes from their imagination, and it comes from falsehood. So part of this is, what is false about me? What was the result of my education? What was the result of my family background? And at the last meeting, I talked about this thought experiment. Imagine that at birth you are cloned, or you become two, and the other part of you is taken to the other side of the world and raised in a different culture, a different religion, a different family. The similarities between the two of you would be essential qualities, and the difference would be personality. And so this gives us sort of just a peek into what our personality is. What would I be like if I was raised differently, with a different language, a different culture, a different religion? How would I be similar? And to try to attempt to see those things that were imposed on you, that came from the outside. Aware of yourself, your body, your breathing, coming back into this moment. Man has no permanent and unchangeable I. Every thought, every mood, every desire, every sensation, says I. And in each case, it seems to be taken for granted that this I belongs to the whole to the whole man, and that a thought, a desire, or an aversion is expressed by the whole. In actual fact, there is no foundation whatever for this assumption. Man's every thought and desire appeals. Man's every thought and desire appeals and lives quite separately and independently of the whole. Just give me. And the whole never expresses itself for the simple reason that it exists as such only physically as a thing and in the abstract as a concept. And this comes back to something that I've talked about before. We can look at the development of ourself as the growth of different beings. First, we have to grow our Kesdjan body. And then we have to grow our higher being body. It's like building those successive stories on the apartment building. And so I've used the metaphor that, you know, when we're born, it's like our physical body, the octave of food is fully developed. And although our personality takes shape throughout our life, you know, we can use that as an analogy. And our essence, the Kesdjan body, exists only sort of as a fetus, perhaps like a 25-week-old fetus that is incapable of surviving outside of the physical body. And so we have to grow our Kesdjan body. We've got to develop the octave of air and grow that part of ourselves. And the higher being body only exists as a single cell, like the single cell before it actually became an embryo, when, you know, your father's DNA and your mother's DNA united into that single cell that you once were. And this is analogous to our highest being body. It exists more in potential than in reality. We can speak about it, but it's not there. We have to grow it. But to grow it, first we have to build the story in World 24, that next level, and make sure it's secure and stable before we can begin to develop at the higher level. So our whole, the real I, only exists more as a potential than as a reality, and we have to develop it. Again, try and shift into essence, become aware of your body, your breathing. Man has no individual I, but there are instead hundreds and thousands of separate small I's, very often entirely unknown to one another, never coming into contact, or on the contrary, hostile to each other, mutually exclusive and incompatible. Each minute, each moment, man is saying or thinking I, and each time his I is different. Just now it was a thought, now it is a desire, now it is a sensation, now it is another thought, and so on, endlessly. Man is a plural, or plurality. Man's name is legion, referring to that passage in the Bible, you know, thy name is legion. But here, if you notice, you know, just now it was a thought, now it is a desire, now it is a sensation. This is not brought out and developed in Search of the Miraculous. Uspensky didn't spend long enough with Mr. Gurdjieff. But a thought, now it's an I in the head brain. Now it's a desire, an I in the feeling brain. Now it is a sensation, an I in the body brain, the body brain. So we can actually begin to classify these various I's as to whether it's head brain, body brain, or feeling brain. Elsewhere and in other parts of the teaching, Mr. Gurdjieff said it's like there are three different men or beings within inside ourselves that are always constantly struggling against each other. And now one is dominant, and then the other one is dominant, and then the other one is dominant. And so this gives us a certain degree of classification where we can begin to say, if we can observe an eye, does this belong with my head brain, my body brain, or my feeling brain? So we may have thousands of eyes, thousands of these different imprints on the roles that continually churn inside ourselves. But some of these imprints are on the intellectual center, the mental roles that they're imprinted on, and some of them are on the physical and others in the emotional. So we can begin to make these broad, general, characterize them broadly and generally. Just aware of your breathing, aware of your body, aware of the difference between the black and the white and the yellow on the screen, aware of the sounds that you hear, any smells coming in, aware of your eyes perceiving light and color, your ears perceiving sound, your nose perceiving smell, your mouth perceiving taste buds, sensing your body as one organic whole, if you can do that. The alteration of eyes, their continual obvious struggle for supremacy is controlled by accidental external influences. Warmth, sunshine, fine weather immediately call up a whole group of eyes. Cold fog, rain, call up another group of eyes, other associations, other feelings, other actions. There is nothing in a man able to control the change of eyes, chiefly because man does not notice or know it. He always lives in the last eye. And this is basically a definition of the effect that buffers have on us. Buffers like the blinders that horses wear to see differences. And he likened each eye to a car of a train, or a carriage of a train. And the fenders, the big pieces of rubber between these carriages on a train, he likened to buffers so that they didn't bump into each other. And so we flip from one eye to another without seeing this as a result of these buffers within ourselves. And if we saw it, we could go crazy. A normal man, the buffers are a protective mechanism. They protect them from seeing how inconsistent they really are, how they change from one moment to the next. Some eyes, of course, are stronger than others. And I'm going to make an aside here. Mr. Gurdjieff said it's very important within the work to create a deputy steward. In other words, to create a work eye and to strengthen that eye through continually using it, to develop an interest in the work, to develop that eye and to make it stronger. So going back to the text, and become aware of the color, how your eyes are noticing white, black, yellow, how your eyes are seeing things on the screen. Be mindful of what you see, sensing your body, aware of your body. But it is not their own. Some eyes, of course, are stronger than others, but it is not their own conscious strength. They have been created by the strength of accidents or mechanical external stimuli. This is a devastating one to observe in yourself when you realize that certain eyes that you've strengthened have imprisoned you. You know, perhaps when you walk into work, you have a certain work eye that's pretty dominant and you act a certain way, and you go home and you're different at home. And then you go see your family and you're different with your family. To realize how some of these pull you in is very startling. And it was one of the things that he told his students during the Nazi occupation when he told them to play a role. In other words, the personality, to play your personality. The observations that his students made, how quickly and easily it was to become that mask, that role. So they were no longer playing a role. And they began to realize how little ability they have to do, how infinitesimal their will is. Mr. Gurdjieff said that we lack unity, we lack the ability to do, and we lack real will. Try to play a role next time you go to work or you're in a situation like that. Play the role of yourself and see how quickly you get pulled in to that role, and you will realize how strong these things are. So again, aware of yourself, aware of your body, your breathing, aware of the smells, the taste in your mouth, the sensation of self, your breathing, the movement of the muscles involved in breathing, the awareness of your whole body, if you can, from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head. Education, imitation, reading, the hypnotism of religion, caste, and traditions, or the glamour of new slogans create very strong eyes in man's personality, which dominate a whole series of other weaker eyes. But their strength is the strength of the roles of the centers, and all eyes making up man's personality have the same origin as these roles. They are the result of external influences, and both are set in motion and controlled by fresh external influences. And here it's also very important to realize that, Mr. Gurdjieff said that, you read a single word and it passes from the empty to the void. But you come across that again and again and again and again and again and again, and something crystallizes within you. And so our personality, and in particular these specific eyes within ourselves, are capable of growing stronger and stronger. Just talking about the Proud Boys and white nationalism and this virus that is sweeping the Western world politically. The more you step into that, the more you grow it. So we grow our eyes by reinforcing them. So you think I'm a special person, and then someone says you're a special person, and then you do all of these things. It's the hardest, strongest eyes within us have been developed over time. And so it's like a tiny little crystal. Something else is crystallized on top, and then we crystallize it again, and then we crystallize it again, and we crystallize it again, and we crystallize it again. And every time we use that eye, every time that eye becomes dominant, it becomes a little stronger. So that we have certain eyes that are very strong. And when we notice that those eyes are strong, we've got to weaken them. We've got to work against them. It gives us the opportunity to work against them, to begin to decrystallize them, to begin to remove their power and strength. So the habitual way that we normally exist, certain eyes tend to become dominant, and they become more and more powerful the more and more we wield them. It's like we grow them with our attention or our lack of attention. Okay, I think actually that's it. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. I'm going to unmute everyone as well. I've kind of muted us. I've covered a lot of material today, and oops. Okay, any questions? We've got like 10 more minutes on this. Come on, there's lots of questions. I know it.
question. I was wondering if what is the or is magnetic center related to essence, or is that something that's more with personality?
No, it's related to essence. They say that the magnetic center is supposed to be the part of the higher emotional center, part of our higher development. The higher emotional center is supposed to be fueled by hydrogen 24, which is the same level of essence as essence. So the magnetic center is something slightly different. The magnetic center, a lot of people just do not have a magnetic center. If you have one and it gets activated, your life will never be normal. You'll never be able to sleep quite so peacefully as you may have. I think of the magnetic center as a lodestone in the heart. Once it becomes activated, it orients us towards conscious influences. It orients us towards the path, almost like the needle of a compass orients us to north. And when you step off the path, you start to feel it, you start to know it. There were many times in my life I thought, why am I doing this? Why am I leading this life? I want to be normal like everyone else. And I would try for 2, 3, 4, 5 months, and I couldn't do it. My magnetic center was like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's no, this is the direction you have to go. This is the way you have to follow. But it's different than, it comes from the essence. It's at the level of essence. So when we are aware of that within us, that orients us towards spiritual teachings, it is a world 24 phenomenon that helps us to follow down the path. But, I'll have to think more deeply to, figure out the connection between the magnetic center and personality. I think the magnetic center helps us to move away from personality. Any other questions? Ian?
Fair to say, we've got this sort of distinction between essence and personality, and then we've got the multiple eyes and the 3 different centers. Do personality and essence exist in each center? I'm assuming they do, but
I would believe so. Actually, I meant to bring these up this week. Maybe I'll begin the next meeting with Mr. Gurdjieff's Love, Hope, and Faith. The different aspects. But the way J.G. Bennett described it is that in World 48, and we cannot get rid of World 48. We cannot get rid of our personality. We need that. It's like a story. It's like you can't be on the 8th floor of an apartment building and then remove the 6th floor. It's there. But he said in World 48, we have 3 brains. We have a head brain, a body brain, and a feeling brain. And within World 48, within the head brain, the body brain, and the feeling brain, this is where personality would reside. It would reside in each of those 3 brains. But as we move up to the level of World 24, up to essence or into essence, he said there, and he said, Mr. Gurdjieff, if you pay attention, he uses terms very specifically. There he referred to the intellectual center, the physical center, and the emotional center. So in World 48, at the earth level, in terms of the ray of creation, we have 3 brains. In World 24, we have 3 centers. And in World 12, they're an indivisible whole, and we can't speak of them as being separate. We can speak of them as being the different aspects of ourself. The word, it's escaping me, the word that Mr. Gurdjieff used to express ourselves at World 12. But at World 12, that's the level of the real I where there's a fundamental unity and spiritualized parts. So in World 12, one of our spiritualized parts is more intellectual, or not one of our spiritualized parts, but part of our spiritualized part is more intellectual. And then we have a spiritualized part that's more physical and a spiritualized part that's more emotional. But they're really more of a fundamental unity. And so we can only we speak of them as a part of a whole. So a spiritualized part of a whole, at the level of essence, at the level of world 24, the centers, and then world 48, brains. And so this also gives us a different understanding, a different metaphor, a different way of approaching this. I don't know if that explains, that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Any other? How were you able to, when I rang the bell? Did you have, were you able to do it easily, difficult? Were you able to be aware of your body while reading, while understanding? If you were, you will have a greater memory of this meeting than you might otherwise.
I know
Yes.
it got slightly
Yes.
harder to do.
Okay, easy and harder. Okay.
Hi, hello,
Angelica.
Jan, but Angelica it's great.
You found it easy to do?
Yes,
Angelica?
for me, it's easy. It's easy.
Yeah. You've done a
It's
lot of
not-
it.
What
You've done a
is-
lot of this inner work already, and
Yes.
you know, living where you live, and the life and the work. You're not in an office where people are yelling at you, and
Yes.
you're an artist, and you cook vegan food for Tibetan lamas. You know,
Yeah.
of course, you know, you will have more of an opportunity.
No, it's so easy to go, and I don't need to think now. I must remember myself.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I mean, it's like a muscle. The stronger the muscle, the more we're able to do it. So the more we self-remember, the more we become present here and now in this moment, the easier it becomes. And as I've always said, we've got to work from above and below. And the above is pulling ourselves up to that level, and the below is working, you know, against our personality and figuring out where energy has been blocked and where we are broken in order to free that energy. And then your lifestyle, Angelica, it allows you more freedom than if you worked in an office tower and you had a boss who had a boss who had a boss, and it gives you the opportunity to be more real throughout your day. Ian, you had a comment.
Yeah, you know, when we first started, you'd ring the bell, and I'd be back in my, remember that I had a body, be back in my body. And then as the meeting went on, I mean, the muscle metaphor is spot on. You know, it's like you're trying to lift a weight, and the first few times you're like, oh yeah, this is easy.
Yeah.
I can do this for hours. And then, you know, after a few reps, it's a little bit harder. You can get into the body, but it feels more like molasses. It feels a little stickier, like instead of just zoop, a little slower. And there's for me, there's a feeling of like if you were to lift a weight and try and hold it there, you can feel the muscle fatigue. There's this like tension, this locked up feeling, and I could feel that starting to sink in with the bodily sensation, and needing sort of more force or more tension to keep my mind from just checking out of that. So.
Yeah. Okay. You know, I had my mindfulness bell. I'll just hold it.
Oh,
Recognize that?
I do.
It's the Trinity. Ian and his girlfriend passed through Toronto Airport last summer, and he from Ireland, and he gave this to me. We actually went down to the lake shore, and I had a veggie dog, and you know, we met for 90 minutes, and so just
a layover, yeah.
a little layover in Toronto. I met, so he's the only one that I've met, and only for 90 minutes. But it's amazing how we can have friendships and connect with people through the internet. I'm surprised, pleasantly surprised. At any rate, thank you for being here today. And for those of you watching on Facebook, thank you. For those of you watching on YouTube, thank you. The next meeting, I will go, you know, more about other things, you know, the personality, and well, I'll just play it by ear. But I want to, you know, talk about how the misuse of C12, and that's related to all of this. So we will, or no, the next meeting, I'm going to do mindfulness. Mindfulness, and then probably the meeting after, or maybe even the meeting after, I will do the misuse of C12, and it'll all connect, and you'll begin to see a deeper picture. Okay, I'd like to thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you.
And
Thank you.
Obrigada.
obrigada. You know, ciao, ciao, bye.
Tchau, tchau.
Ciao.
Adios.
Obrigada. Ai,